Welcome back to Just Another Solar Podcast with Luke Beattie. That's me, Karl Jensen. G'day, Karl.
That's me, Luke. Plenty to report here in Melbourne. It is now officially winter and the weather is cooked, and we had 4 whole days of summer this year. Anyway, I'm glad that my energy retailer gives me free power from 11 till 2 because I'm using that to heat my house, heat my water and charge my cars.
And we'd normally be joined by industry legend Nigel Morris. Nigel's in the air at the moment, flying to Adelaide, I believe. So I apologise to people listening in advance because Nigel is a bit like the rudder to make sure we don't go too far off track, Karl.
We don't get less talking from Nigel.
You get to fill the gaps.
That's it. That's it.
There's been lots of news, as always. We heard in the last fortnight that Suntrix in South Australia is closing the doors. They've been around for a long time. And I just wanted to note, before we get your comments, Karl, that they did it well. You hear of companies being insolvent, going into administration. This was on the front foot. It was noted on their website. All of the stakeholders, installers, suppliers were all engaged, contact emails and numbers on the website. But it's a shame to see them go, Karl.
It is. It's not the first, won't be the last for this season. I'm out on the road a lot. I get a lot of doom and gloom stories, people, asking their staff to take holidays. It is very quiet.
SunWiz's data came out for 2023, and it said that last year the battery installs absolutely exploded. So I can't remember the figures off the top of my head. The answer is all of the above, right? Solar, batteries, heat pumps, chargers.
It's a bit like buying a house. If you buy a house in a booming market, you pay more money for it. You pay more stamp duty. You might get a little bit more for your own house. They reckon it's better to buy and sell in a low market because all of those things are the same. And I'd say the solar industry is absolutely a low market at the moment. There's some incredible pricing out there for mums and dads. And, that's sales 101. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, get them sorted. I certainly have. I don't think there's any family members that are left now that solared and heat pumped. So ultimately, it's a great time for the consumers to be buying.
The other thing that was on today was the Smart Energy Council had an event in Queensland today, which was all around the Queensland Stewardship Program. So it's all about end of life of solar panels. And they've been working with the Queensland government and the Energy Minister, Mick de Brenni, and they've had a trial there for some time now, which has been successful by all accounts. And today they've announced, the Queensland government, in conjunction with the Smart Energy Council, that their stewardship program is going to be expanded. It's going to include residential, commercial, and utility. The biggest naysayers of solar are talking about this impending tidal wave of solar panel waste. And if we don't get it right, they're right. There's so many panels going in. There's so many that will be coming to end of life. So we thought it'd be great to get on a guest who knows all about this, who's involved in the industry, an all-round great guy. So we've got James Petesic from PV Industries. G'day, James.
Hey, Luke. Hey, Karl. Thanks for having me.
Mate, that's another one of those episodes where we wipe the brow and go, holy shit, we've got an amazing guest. And these occasions don't come up on every episode, but you're certainly an amazing person in our industry that probably not many people know. So start telling us about yourself.
I was hoping I wasn't going to be just another guest on Just Another Solar Podcast. So that's
We're
good.
just going to sign off. You can just go ahead, James. We'll give you like half an hour. Just
No, thanks very much, as I said, for having me. I started PV Industries in the latter end of 2018. So it's been 6 years, coming on 6 years now. At the time, I was working selling software for Oracle, a large multinational software company, and always wanted to start my own business and always wanted to do something that was impactful, that left the world a better place than I found it, and obviously make money along the way. I turned my mind to recycling, speaking to a waste manager up in Queensland, actually. Funny you mentioned the Queensland event today, Luke, at a local government conference. And I told him about my idea for an e-waste collection app, and he basically turned around and said, well, to be honest, mate, that's been done. If you want to look at something new, why don't you have a look at solar panels? There's a massive issue and no one's doing anything about it. And I was like, first I've heard of it. Let me go and do some research. So I did that, and 3 or 4 months later, PV Industries was born. And since then, we've received approximately 6.8 million in government funding from New South Wales, Victorian EPAs, and the federal government in the most recent CRCP round. We've been blessed enough to be receiving all this government support, so we have to do the right thing, and we are driven by leaving the world in a better place than we found it. And that's always been the MO from day one. So it's really, I guess, reassuring for us at multiple steps along the way. Now, 4 grants we've received, it's a bit of, I guess, endorsement about what we're doing and gives us reassurance that we are doing the right thing and a bit more motivation to get it right along the way.
We've discussed solar panel recycling before on the show. It was a different process to what you do. So it was lop the cables off, pulverize the panels and separate it from there. For the listeners out there, do you want to explain very simply your process for recycling solar panels?
Through the government grants we received, we've developed 2 pieces of equipment in-house, meaning we've lodged patents on them and they're our IP. And the benefit to that is that we can manufacture them at a low cost and at short lead times. First one is a deframer. We pop the cables off, the junction box off, and deframe the panel at the same time. And that leaves us with clean alley, clean copper cable. We'll chop it off the junction box and then the junction box separately. We can recover all of those 3 outputs pretty easily. The remainder of the panel is effectively like instead of a, say, 40 mil thick panel with the frame, we're down left with a 4 mil piece of glass. That product goes into our deglassing machine, or deglasser. As you can tell, we're pretty original. I've got zero creativity, deframers and deglassers. Do what they say they do. So the deglasser removes the vast majority of the glass, about 90% of it, and it just leaves a small amount of residual glass on what we call the laminate. And that laminate product is approximately about 10% by weight of the panel that it started, or as it started its life.
Yep.
And what's left there is all the silicon wafers, a little bit of that residual glass, and the EVA layer that encapsulates the wafer.
So that'd be really thin by this stage, wouldn't they?
So that's left at about a 1 millimeter thick product, I guess you'd call it, commodity.
Toughened glass usually shatters into pieces. How is this achieved? We got a laser beam or something.
Not laser beams. You give me too much credit there, Karl. It's essentially, how do I describe it? It's sort of like a hammering or a milling device that I guess operates at a set depth so that we can cut away the glass without damaging the wafer as much as possible. Some panels have like blistering, so there's sort of a bit of bowing in that wafer, and it sometimes catches it and whatever. That's outside of our control. But the idea for us and the MO has been clean separation of products to retain the material at their highest possible value, rather than just pulverizing a solar panel, which has its merits, I'm not going to lie, and we have explored and are exploring a shredding process, but it's not pulverizing. So there's plenty of different methods that you can go down to shred, but we definitely don't pulverize. The goal of our IP is to selectively, I guess, mill off that glass at a depth which limits contamination from the wafer, because 1, it contaminates the glass, but 2, we're losing value from the silicon, the silver, the copper that makes up the solar wafer. And I guess to put it into dollars and cents, approximately 50% of the value of a recovered panel is in that final 10% by weight. So that product, that 1 millimeter thick layer that comes out of our deglasser, holds half of the value of the, if not more, of the panel itself.
That's crazy. I'm really impressed. I would have never thought that was even remotely possible, but that's incredible technology, mate. And I'm sure lots and lots of very smart people it took to come up with that.
It was a bit of effort, lots of trial and error, but the New South Wales government grant from the EPA that we received, it was called the Circular Solar Trial. It was exactly that, and it was just tipping money into R&D so that we could come up with these machines to ensure that panels were able to be recycled in Australia. And they identified this issue proactively in trying to make sure that the industry was able to cope with the pending tidal wave, I think you referred to it as, Luke. So it's that sort of doom and gloom perspective that everybody tries to shower across a green industry to kick it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I read something a couple of weeks ago, and it was about someone was complaining about a wind farm and the microplastics from the leading edge erosion of the blades ending up in the ocean. And I just went, you can freeze to death in the dark, mate. Unbelievable. You know, the things that people come up with to slow down the transition to renewables is just staggering.
And what's the market for the recovered materials? I know you were walking around the Smart Energy Conference with a little bag of silver. I mean, that's eye-catching and that's got some value in it. But realistically, how much could be recovered and sold? What would that market look like?
Silver as a market, let's just call it, it's the sexiest, like you said. But silver's about 1.2 million a ton. So it's about $1 a gram. We've got a really broad range of silver content in panels. So the older panels, there's always a saying in like the waste industry, old is gold, particularly in e-waste, came from gold in mobile phones and computers and PCB printed circuit boards. But it's very much the same in solar panels. So an older solar panel may have anywhere from 30 to 40 grams of silver, and a newer solar panel may only have 4 to 6 grams of silver. Obviously, the newer ones are less valuable from that perspective, from a silver perspective, but then they're larger. So they will have more silicon, aluminium, potentially copper, and glass. Not that glass is super, super valuable, but
would it be possible that it'll scale to the point where the recovered materials are going to cover the cost of recycling?
I think so. But the solar panel recycling industry, I always say, is sort of similar to plasma TVs. You know, when the plasmas came out, they were $10,000 and only the rich and famous could have them. But now you can go down to Aldi or JB Hi-Fi and pick them up on sale for a couple $100. So I think it's very much the same with solar panel recycling. When we started, it wasn't just us, but one of our competitors who's since disappeared, I think it was sort of like $30 a panel. Now it's close to that $10 mark. But the more panels that we can recycle as a country, the more price will come down because we're discovering new end markets. We're pushing that upper boundary further up and we're recovering more value from that panel. So, yeah, I think the short answer is definitely we'll get to a point where it's a free service. As to how long it'll take to get there, I'm not sure. But product stewardship is also another one that's going to help us reduce the cost of recycling.
Yeah, would you be supportive of, say, a levy on manufacturers or importers?
Yeah, how they calculate it, I guess, is probably above my pay grade, but I would definitely be supportive of a stewardship program. There was a discussion paper released last year to the industry around product stewardship and the thought that was being put into it from the federal government. So, yeah, we did give input. There was some negatives and some positives, but overall, it would be nothing but a good thing for us to see in the same way that batteries, in the same way that the return and earn for cans and bottles, but the same for computers, the NTCRS, the National TV and Computer Recycling Scheme.
Makes perfect sense. We're fast becoming a third world country because all of our engineering skills goes overseas. So, you know, we have to go back to recycling.
Yeah.
Yeah, but are we going to be able to scale up to a point where recycling can ramp up at the same rate as the waste is being created? Solar farms coming to end of life, panels coming off roofs.
Oh, okay. I understand what you're saying.
Because there's still a lot of solar panels going into containers to the Pacific, to Africa,
sure.
Middle East. Wouldn't we be able to ramp up at the same rate as that waste is ramping up?
Well, our answer is yes. Aside from our process I just described for deframing and deglassing, we're exploring, let's say, a more agricultural shredding approach. And again, shredding is an asterisk and it's a very delicate, I guess, that's the wrong word to use for a shredding approach, is delicate, but it's a very delicate line that we sort of play with where we're able to obtain product that's big enough that we can separate it cleanly, but not so small that we're contaminating everything. When I say shredding, it's not just chuck it in and hope for the best. There's science behind it. But the reason we went down that path is twofold. One, bifacial panels. They pose a bit of a different issue to the recycling industry. And secondly, a lot of the panels that are on solar farms are bifacials. And when they arrive by the B double load. And from our perspective, we received 3 B doubles in one day from a solar farm. And at that point, we went, oh, we're going to need a bigger boat. We need something that's going to be able to process this a lot faster. So the purpose of our CRCP grant, the most recent federal government money that we were successful in obtaining, is to establish a high volume recycling facility or plant, and it will have the capacity for like 20 tons an hour. And that was sort of backwards engineered so that we could be processing a B double every hour. So when a solar farm does come offline, I'm not sure if you guys have heard, but there is the first solar farm coming offline in WA, which is a long way from where, no offense to listeners in WA or yourself, Luke, but the vast majority of R&D and solar panel recycling expertise sits on this side of the country. There is a whole nother challenge around logistics and what's going to happen to those panels and how they're going to get recycled and are they going to get recycled.
Are they silicon panels?
They're silicon panels, yep. I'm assuming you're referring to like cadmium telluride panels. Yeah, they're definitely, they're silicon panels. The cadmium telluride ones we don't touch. Neither do, I think, any of our competitors.
Because they have heavy metals and
cadmium is considered a hazardous waste. So we don't want to touch it from that perspective and can't touch it from an EPA perspective. But also the company that manufactures a lot of these panels, First Solar, they have their own recycling program that they advertise quite readily, apparently take back panels. Obviously, I don't know, so I'm not trying to rag on First Solar, but because we don't deal with those panels, but on the back of their panels that we have seen, it says, call this number and we will recycle them for free.
So coming back to the logistics issue, though, you're talking about WA, but the same would apply to regional New South Wales or northern Queensland. So you can have the same issues where you're not going to have a plant nearby. I'm not sure whether you could have mobile plants, but if you're talking multi-megawatt solar farms, would you need to have some sort of mobile plant, or is it all about logistics, getting it back to the existing plants?
I'm going to say it's the latter, and purely because if you have a mobile plant, you are just turning a solar panel into, let's just say it's raw commodities. Rather than having a logistical problem for one product being a solar panel, we then turn into a logistical problem for a bunch of products. So the aluminium will need to go to an aluminium smelter. The glass will need to go to a glass manufacturer, a construction company, like whoever the downstream taker of that glass is. You're going to have the silicon, the silver, or the wafer sort of composite. That's got to come back to a central facility to get processed, because most likely, and I have not seen any mechanical means to recover those metals, so it's going to be chemical. That has to be in a central location. You can't have a chemical plant running around mobile. So yeah, I think whilst having a mobile recycling facility sounds cool, practically I don't see it having a future. And I don't mean to sound negative, it's just practical reality of having to move tons and tons of aluminium, tons and tons of glass. How are you going to do that from the back of Burke?
Makes perfect sense, James.
So next question then, who would cover the cost? Solar farms are one thing. Maybe it's built into the end of life, into the solar farm. I'm not sure. But let's talk about a regional area where you've got commercial systems and residential systems coming offline. Who should bear the cost to bring it to those central plants in capital cities?
Maybe it's not in a capital city. At the moment, we're in Sydney and Melbourne because that's where I live and that's where Troy lives in Melbourne and that's where we have our facilities. But we are exploring regional New South Wales, facilities in regional New South Wales for a larger plant. I personally don't think that a solar farm being decommissioned should be brought to a metro setting. I think we should have regional locations where we're recycling these things because one, land's cheaper, rent's cheaper. Two, it's closer to the source. And three, for any logistical challenges, we have a lower cost option with the inland rail. So we're not putting hundreds of trucks on a road. We're putting it on a container onto the rail line, cheaper for everybody.
Seems completely logical, James. Anyone would think that you were doing this for a living.
At least I'm sounding good. That's positive, Karl. In terms of your question, though, Luke, and I don't mean to be a politician and dodge it, the cost at the end of the day is borne by the consumer or by the solar farm. The solar farms that we have serviced to date, they've all covered the cost of transport. We've organised it, but they cover it. It's all part of the cost is passed on. From a drop-off point perspective, we have drop-off points with Newcastle Council, Dubbo Council. We're about to set up / announce another 3. The price of logistics is all built in to the price per panel for the customer when they come to the landfill. So they'll come to landfill to the gate. For example, at Newcastle, I think it's like $13.50. That's no secret. It's on the rate card on the website. It's a specific line item to say if you have a solar panel, this is how much it is per panel. And in that cost is included my recycling fee, the transportation fee, and the administration fee from the council's perspective to administer the service. Yeah, that's the short answer around who's bearing the cost. How that may change in the future, I think will be dictated by a product stewardship scheme, because the most likely cost that will cover in the first instance is transport and logistics, to make sure it gets back to a recycling facility at zero cost.
You've received government money, and I suppose with that comes an extra lot of scrutiny. There was a solar panel recycler in Adelaide who had contracts with solar panel manufacturers for their warranty stock. They went broke, but it was found that they were just knocking the frames off, lopping the cables, and stockpiling all of the rest of it. Not really much recycling going on there. There's obviously trust. You've had to show that you are reputable, that you've got integrity, but there's ongoing scrutiny. Am I correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, outside, like you said, of the personal integrity discussion, I say to all the customers we deal with, well, a couple of things. One, ask as many questions of my competitors as you possibly can, because that's the only way to give yourself confidence that they're doing the right thing. And secondly, I received a bunch of government money and I cannot be seen to be not doing the right thing. Outside of everything I may tell you, the fact that we continue to get government support should be evidence enough that we are doing the right thing, and we have additional layers of scrutiny because we have to have reporting period. We have regular reporting periods to the government, tell them what we're doing, to show them evidence from a financial perspective that we're spending the money in the right ways, and evidence that we are recovering what we say we are recovering. There are progress updates. There are checks and balances along the way. It's not just here's $3 million right off into the sunset. I'll see you in the Bahamas. It's we're going to promise you $3 million, and it's going to be delivered over tranches based on your performance along that period of time and the outcomes that you deliver. So we have, like I said, regular reporting periods to justify the work that we've done and justify the next payment of that grant.
Tell us about solar panel recycling. How big is the opportunity in the coming decades?
The Australian market, there's over 110 million solar panels that exist in Australia at this point in time, both residential and commercial and utility scale.
It's a big number. I did chat to the guy, I've forgotten his name, who's been employed by the Smart Energy Council as the stewardship guy. And he said, yeah, it's all fine and good, pulverising these things into dust, but then how you separate that dust is really, really difficult. So it's great that we were saving the dust to figure out how we're going to separate the materials later on. And it looks like James has got a much smaller pile of dust that's got more valuable stuff in it, which is a huge step forward.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say as well, Karl, like if anyone's sitting there thinking I've got an old solar panel, I'm going to get my 30 grams of silver out of there. It's not that easy, I can promise you. We've been doing it for 6 years, as I said, and we only, at the beginning of this year that I showed Luke, we obtained our first 25-gram button of silver. It's taken 6 years to get 25 grams of silver out of a solar panel. So yeah, if you guys, anyone out there listening, can manage to get the silver out of those old panels yourselves, I'd love to hear about it.
And what's the market for the glass and silicon?
Great questions. The glass is an interesting one because there's such a range of applications for that glass. We have partnered with John Holland through the University of New South Wales. So obviously John Holland worked with UNSW for a bunch of their projects for green concrete and the like. UNSW asked us if we would like to include John Holland in one of our grant applications, and we said, yep, sure, we're happy to work with them in order to replace river sand, naturally mined river sand, with our PB glass in non-structural concrete. In terms of the market demand for glass, I think the state of New South Wales has a demand, I don't know if it's state or country, don't shoot me over it, but the bottom line is the demand for recycled glass is 2 million tonnes a year. And there is no guaranteed source of supply that can give them that amount of glass outside of potentially solar panels, because there's so many panels and they're just made up of so much glass.
Rewind just a second. You're saying that instead of putting sand into concrete mix, we use glass? Correct. Because it's the same thing? Correct. Sand is just glass that's really small on the beach?
Yeah, it's been refined and silicon dioxide. That's all it is. So that's...
There you go. Even that didn't actually... I didn't join the dots there. Everybody knows that sand goes into mortar and concrete, but I didn't join the dots that's what recycled glass was being used for. There you go. Amazing.
Yeah, curbside glass that gets picked up in your weekly or fortnightly council collection will most likely go through a treatment process and end up into some form of construction application. And there's no reason why we can't put PV glass into construction applications because it's much, much cleaner. And you think about the curbside bottles, they've got oil, stickers, sugars from soft drink all on that product mixed in together that will react negatively with concrete.
Yeah,
So,
well, here's me thinking that since we've drawn those dots together, I'm thinking that a little bit of strawberry jam probably wouldn't make that much difference in concrete. But now that you pointed out,
it ruined it.
Better.
It really plays with the setting and the drying properties of concrete and the chemical reactions that happen during that process, and it's really detrimental. So the companies that use these glass for concrete need to make sure it's clean. And that requires water, which requires more energy, another step in the process. Ours is much cleaner. Obviously, they have more certainty around their product that they're manufacturing. Concrete's definitely one. And the reason that we have been exploring concrete before people say how terrible we're putting solar glass into concrete. Now, yep, whilst that's true, and half of me agrees with you, the other half of me says, there is no other industry in Australia that is capable of receiving the quantity of glass that we will be producing in 5 to 10 years. Zero. It will pale in comparison with any other glass source. So we need a high volume market for this glass.
So the next question is, well, is it ever going to be possible to recycle that glass back into something that would make another solar panel?
Yep. Absolutely. So what I was going to mention was we're going from a low value, high volume application in concrete, which gives us certainty that we've got a market for that glass. The other end of the spectrum, or the highest possible value that we can obtain for glass, is to put it back into PV glass. The issue with that, there is no PV glass manufacturer in Australia.
But that could change. The Solar Sunshot program, they're actually mentioning upstream components and materials, and that they would support production credits, and they cited glass as well as one of the things that the government would support.
Well, traditionally, glass has been very, very intensive with gas. So Pilkington's, that was one of the school excursions I did when I was 14 or 15.
Back in the day.
The glass factory, and, you look through the window or whatever, and there's this enormous gas burners, using a spectacular amount of energy. Yeah. Obviously, we can create heat with other means, but it's still energy intensive, yeah, James?
Yeah, for sure. And why not in the business of manufacturing glass? So I don't know the ins and outs of, I know a little bit about it. Like you said, it's highly energy intensive. There might be some other hoops we have to jump through, well, not just we, but as a recycling sector, to be able to provide that glass back to a PV glass manufacturer. They will most likely need it in a highly pure form, which is great for us because we can do that, recover glass or recover their products as cleanly as possible so we can obtain the highest possible value. But the biggest blocker to that MO for every single product, not just glass, silicon is another example. Who's going to buy our silicon? We have zero manufacturing capability onshore. And yep, 100%. Hopefully that changes. And that's why, from our perspective, the recent announcements have been very exciting because we are potentially unlocking higher value for our products that we recover, glass, silicon, copper. Whoever is willing to pay more for that product because they require it through their manufacturing process, such as new solar panels, which would be ideal, all it's going to do is lead to a better outcome for consumers with a lower cost. We'll be able to drop our price, be more competitive, offer a free service, whatever it might be, if we can increase the value of the products that we recover.
I've got some amazing news for you here, James, and that is Australia's largest export, as it stands right now, is empty 40-foot containers. So if you've got to ship it overseas, Luke and I back in the day had a customer who put a solar system on top of a production facility that was jamming bales of hay into containers. So obviously your materials are far higher value than that.
Yeah.
And if you've got to ship them overseas, then it's not that hard.
I don't think there is another alternative for silicon, because a statistic that I am aware of through the silicon to solar reporting that the UNSW folk have put together, I think 98, 97% of all the silicon ingots in the world are manufactured in China for solar panels. So the one thing that I am mildly concerned about, and I won't throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that the announcements are all hot air, because I don't know enough yet, but what I am concerned about is that $1 billion of funding going to a solar panel assembly line. If all we're doing is buying like wafers from China, glass from China, aluminium from China, shipping it into here and just assembling it, that won't help the recycling sector, because we are still having to send our products back to China. So we're not shoving glass into concrete because we want to. It's just a necessary evil, because that's the market that's going to, or the industry that's going to take the quantity of glass that the solar panel recycling sector is going to be producing.
So I'm happy with concrete. It's better than road base.
Yeah. Road base, asphalt, concrete, any construction application you can think of.
So what's the next 10 years look like for you, James?
Yeah, so I think from a PV industry's perspective, the next 10 years are going to be exciting. We're going to definitely, in the next year or two, we're going to have to hire a lot more people. Part of my day-to-day at the moment is looking for investment, and a lot of that investment is going to go toward hiring staff. At this point in time, I can feel this year alone, the industry is starting to change and emerge. So we need to have people looking after government supply, government contracts, government customers, solar farms. The one guy at the moment we've got working on like glass, one of his sole responsibilities is glass and its end markets. And that just forms part of his role, but that's going to be a specific job in its own right over the next few years. So when we fast forward 10 years, I dare say we're going to need,
a bigger boat.
Definitely a bigger boat. We're going to have Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, I would say like transfer facilities, let's call them, or aggregation points. And we're going to be shipping something. I don't know what that is yet. Whether it's, I don't believe it'll be entire solar panels. That's too expensive, but it will be some form of solar panel product to a central recycling facility. So we'll be sort of size reducing wherever we can establish contracts with takers of our product. Let's say Perth, maybe we get rid of aluminium and glass. In location, there'll be buyers for that product in WA, in Perth, and the rest of it, we can ship it to our central facility in regional New South Wales, for example, where we'll treat it. I'm oversimplifying here, but we're going to treat it chemically and we're going to extract all the metals, silver, silicon, copper. There's a bit of lead in there, a bit of tin in there.
Get that next 25 grams of silver.
Yeah. I'll make you guys some silver rings one day, and we can was it Ninja Turtles or whatever they join?
Mate,
that's a deal, mate.
At $1 a gram, it's it's cheaper than cigarettes. What can I say? It's incredible.
But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Luke. But it's going to be PV Industries. Touch wood, in 10 years, we'll be a lot bigger. We'll have multiple facilities around the country, and we'll have one large processing facility that's going to be processing utility scale panels, and let's just say anything else that we can ship to it that makes sense. Like it might be the wafers, it might be all of the panel, depending where it comes from. But we'll definitely have many more staff, many more locations, and we'll be firing on all cylinders, because in 10 years' time, there's going to be a lot of solar panels coming off roofs every single year.
That's awesome, man. So we wish you the best with all of that. There's not time for a heap more. So we normally throw in some sort of personal question about life balance or something else. But my question to you is that with the last 6 years being so busy for you, ramping up a business and all the stuff that we've discussed so far, what do you do to unwind, or what do you do for fun outside of recycling PV modules?
I am a massive soccer fan of football. So after this, I will be strapping my ankles and going to football training. I stay up at stupid hours of the evening watching English Premier League games on a Saturday and a Sunday. I love fishing. Not that I get too much time to fish these days, but when I do, that was a good thing about COVID, actually. We had to stay at home and we had to have 1 hour of exercise a day. Well, apparently that was our allotted time. And I did every day go fishing for my exercise.
Nice. Very good.
The other one's smoking meats, actually. I don't know if you guys are into good barbecue, but I love a bit of a meat smoking session.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, we'll just go around for last comments. Karl?
I've got nothing, Luke, other than to say it's another one of those spectacular standout episodes where I really learned a lot. And I'm sure everybody in the industry is going to love this podcast because it's stuff that we don't normally think about or consider, but, it gives us that hope that, we're all doing the right thing for the right reasons. And it takes a lot of people outside ourselves to make a renewable energy future. And that means that we've got to do something with it at the end. And James and New South Wales government and other state governments are pumping money into this. And there's opportunities for employment for, the next generation of people after us recovering these solar panels that we've installed. All of this stuff is really inspiring to me. And at the end of the day, Luke, this is why you and I started the podcast in the first place, is to get inspired and get motivated. And the fact that we've got James on has just blown my mind again.
And James Petesic from PV Industries, thanks again for coming on, mate. Any last comments?
Thanks for having me to you both. It was great to spend some time chatting about solar and not solar. And hopefully one day we'll get to go for a fish together.
Sounds good, man. And Nigel Morris, you're not here today, so we're just waiting to get the scorecards and you can tell us whether we did well or whether the podcast was a disaster without you, mate. All the best on your trip. Thanks for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe and share it round, and we'll catch you next time.